Welcome to IAOP's PULSEcasts, a series of web and podcasts meant to entertain, inform, and inspire. I'm Dana Corbett, and I'm here today with Sherry Jost, former strategic sourcing consultant at Zurich Insurance. She is a COP, an IAOP authorized trainer, as well as lead chair for IAOP's Voice of the Customer chapter. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sherry. We're so happy to have you.
It's quite fun to talk about outsourcing with all the professionals in our field.
Excellent. So I just have a few questions to ask you just to build some content, so I'll get going. First question is, what are a few major changes you've seen in your career since becoming a COP?
Well, when I received my COP and I added it to my tagline on my emails, suppliers as well as employees within the company realized, oh, what's a COP? So then they would ask me in elevator conversations or on the telephone. And from the supplier side, I noticed that the suppliers realized I knew outsourcing, I knew the life cycle, and that when they were dealing with me, if it was either on a small work order, anywhere to a large contract, that they brought in more experienced people to the table and that equally understood outsourcing. So I think it put us more on a level playing field, and that we also knew we jumped right to the meat of the problem. So I think it really streamlines the outsourcing process with your suppliers. Saves them time and saves you time as a customer. On the customer side, many of the internal people in my company I dealt with, the vice presidents, they did not know outsourcing perhaps, and because they were new to it, but they really knew their domain. So when they asked me, what's a COP? And I would explain to them, then they realize, oh, I have someone that knows outsourcing. And when they partnered with me, it just made a really good match. They knew their domain. They have great business sense. And the business sense that you bring as a COP plus the outsourcing knowledge is just a great marriage between the two people in a company, because you get the best of both worlds.
Great. So even from that answer, I see that you've seen the IAOP training and COP designation have had a positive impact on your outsourcing deal outcomes. Have you seen that as well as just your relationship with other outsourcing professionals?
Oh, sure. Being part of IAOP as well as the COP, it's just a great network of people. I enjoy this, the OWS Outsourcing World Summit every year. I enjoy the Chicago chapter meetings, the Voice of the Customer meetings, because now I have a peer group who I can reference when I need to. It's also fun in a business as well as a personal way to get to know some of the people in the field, so that when you have a question on any given Tuesday or Wednesday, you just call them up or shoot them a quick email. We also receive the emails from IAOP with questions other people have, and you can chime in with your expertise. So I've just found having the COP designation has helped in building my peer network.
Great. And so if you could give advice to someone who's considering getting certified, what advice would that be?
What's the last part?
If you were going to give advice to someone who is thinking about getting certified, what would the advice be?
The advice would be go for it. It's important to know the whole life cycle. And often when you're a supplier or a customer, you tend to work in 50 or 75% of the life cycle, not the whole life cycle. So when you go for the training, you get not only a great review and learn some new things about the part of the cycle, the life cycle that you are engaged in on a daily basis, but it ensures that you know the other parts of the life cycle. So go for it. The training is a great introduction to things you haven't been doing. It's a good review of the things you're doing, and believe it or not, you find things that you probably should be doing that you aren't doing. Oh, right. Yes, we do those 7 things, but wow, we've been slack, or we're not doing these three as maybe as thoroughly or as contemporarily as other organizations are. So it's a great self-assessment of yourself, of the work you're producing, as well as what your team members are doing at work and how you can strengthen your team.
Great. This next question is a little bit more around the actual training for the certification. So from this training, what is one key takeaway that made you think, wow, I really get this and can use this in my day-to-day life?
Well, the COP designates you are a professional, that this
Right.
is the career choice that you have made, or the place in your career where you have ended up and that you're working at this point in time. So it gives you credibility. And as I mentioned earlier, I really think it streamlines the process. No longer do you need to be in conversations about the basics, but you get right to the heart of the matter. You bring a lot to the table for the supplier as a customer, or the supplier to the customer. And it just makes for great, much better relationships between supplier and customer, because you're on this level playing field.
Great. So around the training, now that you've been going through the process to become an authorized trainer, so you have worked to lead a class, one of our COP public classes, are there any takeaways you've seen now through that instructor lens that maybe you didn't as a participant?
Well, what I noticed is the power of the teams, especially during the case study. Sometimes when you're taking the training and you have to do a case study of some hypothetical company, you say, wow, why am I doing this? I know what I'm doing. But you get in the discussions and you realize that the knowledge that the other participants in the class bring to the table is immense. I mean, you know that they have this knowledge, but when you combine them all, you just see the synergy of the team. I was also impressed watching the case study and how these teams with this diverse background produced great presentations. And first they did their analysis and their conclusions, and then made a presentation. And it was amazing in how short of a time that they could do this. And it was just because of the brain power of all the people in the room. And that old saying that 2 heads are better than 1, that 5 heads are better than 4. So
Right.
it's a very powerful tool, even though sometimes it may seem tedious as a student.
Sure. Great. Well, thank you. Next question is, what are some challenges that you have seen within the outsourcing industry, and has the COP Masterclass helped provide you with a successful toolkit to overcome these challenges?
Well, what I find dealing with in a multi-supplier model, that each supplier has their own framework or life cycle, and they all work with you a bit different. Now, yes, you can adapt to all of them, but when the suppliers attend the COP training, you're back on that same page. And so you have a common framework or practice to use. And this, again, is part of building the relationship and getting the work done more expediently, and even coming to better conclusions in your contract. For example, from the class, we had a very good discussion with the lawyer on limitations of liability. And we know this is a tough topic, but when the supplier and the customer both, of course, the lawyers know a lot more about this topic than outsourcing professionals, because we use the lawyers to negotiate that part of the contract. But as from a business sense, we get a lot more information, and we have a much better starting point for the negotiations. So I think the collaboration that comes out of the COP is just the prime quality of the class.
Great. Thank you so much. So the last question is a little geared towards your involvement with the Voice of the Customer chapter, which, as I mentioned in your introduction, that you are one of the lead chairs for that chapter. The question is, What are the industry changes that you are seeing with your work through training and maybe even running the Voice of the Customer chapter that are truly impacting the way outsourcing is being done?
What's very interesting is when we as a group brainstorm for the topics for our webinars or the topics that we want to use at our OWS meeting where we have customers discuss table topics.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes pretty easy because there's usually 4 or 5 topics that everybody is struggling with or dealing with or growing with at that period of time. And of course, the hot ones right now are supplier risk, RPA, cybersecurity. And as always, people are concerned about pricing methodologies and terms and conditions. So it's very comforting to know that the topics on your mind are the exact topics on probably 90% of your peers. Now, I do notice that by industry, there are differences, especially in the regulated industries, banking and insurance and pharmaceuticals. And it's fun to listen to people that are really deep into some of those subject areas on compliance and regulation, talk about what they're going through. Every once in a while, it makes you feel like your job's a little easier than what they have to do. But you learn a lot by hearing what, governmental and regulatory restrictions. They bring some best practices to our industry that we eventually see trickle down to the non-regulated industries. So that's one part that's really fun on Voice of the Customer. Something I noticed during the COP training session, as I mentioned, we had a legal discussion for about 3-4 hours one morning, and just how enticing that discussion was. When you get a group of outsourcing professionals who, from customer side, are negotiating maybe 2 to 4 contracts a year, or maybe lots of work orders, but they are not doing 12 contracts a year. You learn a lot on the more current way of doing something, maybe some new pricing models. Customers are usually interested in learning how to increase the SLAs to a more functional use. We all hear about the watermelon SLAs, and people can spend many hours. I've seen hundreds of hours on SLAs, and they still don't achieve the results they want. And there's lots of people out there right now on the advisory side, the legal side, and the supplier side that are showing customers better ways to create SLAs to even improve the outcome of the results of your engagement, if it be BPO or ITO or HRO. So you, in the class as well as on Voice of the Customer, you see lots of commonality, and you also see people needing to be educated on the newer topics, the hot topics.
Sure. Well, great. Thank you so much, Sherry. That's all we have for this edition of PULSEcast. Thank you so very much for joining us, and congratulations on your steps to becoming an authorized trainer. We're very, very happy to have you. And thanks so much, and thank you all for listening.
Thanks, Dana. And it's just most enjoyable being part of this organization. It's the one way that outsourcing professionals can stay current in the industry, because once we get into this industry, it's difficult to find a peer group when you're at a customer. And I'm always looking for win-win situations, and joining IAOP has definitely been a win-win for me.
Great. Well, thanks for us too, Sherry. Thanks so much.
Bye now.